I'm with Shmuel Bowman, Executive Director of Operation Lifeshield. Shmuel, what is Operation Lifeshield?
So Operation Life Shield is first and foremost it's a grassroots organization that was founded in 2006 as a response to the Second Lebanon War. There's this idea that the government doesn't have to really be responsible for doing every single thing. It's a very, very beautiful concept of taking action, being responsive to what the needs are. And we see this in communities all over the world, and the same thing was true here. A group of people came together after the Second Lebanon War, in which at the time, 3,000 rockets were launched from Hezbollah in Lebanon into northern Israel, displacing about 100,000 people at the time. This is 2006. And we realized that the classic way of running into your underground bomb shelter and spending, a couple of weeks there that was not the way forward. What we understood is that you and I, right? Paul and I would be sitting having a cup of coffee somewhere at a cafe, for example, or running at the track, or taking our kids to school, whatever, going to worship, and the siren would go off, and we would drop everything. We would drop our coffee, we would drop our prayer books, we would drop whatever, and we'd need to run to a shelter, above ground accessible shelter nearby. Simple, nothing much going on in there except with the protective materials to keep us out of harm's way. And then once the threat is over, once the attack is over, resume with our lives. In other words, try and live as normal a life as possible in an abnormal situation. And thus was born the entire concept of Operation Life Shield, to raise funds from all over the world, from people who really have a heart for Israel, who have a heart for justice, who have a heart for humanity. They really want to be involved and take action with us. And thanks to supporters from all over the world, we're able to place these shelters all over, especially in the Gaza Belt area, southern Israel, northern Israel. But you know what? Today, everywhere. Tel Aviv, at the center of the country, the lower Galilee, just about everywhere is within harm's reach, harm's way of the terrorists, either in Lebanon, that's Hezbollah, or Hamas and the Islamic Jihad in Gaza. And that's what we've been doing for the last number of years. We've placed, wow, over 500 shelters of different sizes and different projects, including, by the way, yes, renovating underground shelters so that they are usable and functioning. And those are also what we've been doing as well.
Now, Israel is receiving rockets at the moment in this current war from Gaza and from Lebanon. Has this been a busy time for you now?
It's never been busier. It's never been busier. We're in a very, we've gone through so many of these battles and mini wars over the years. It almost seems like you could almost plot it on a calendar. You kind of like look at a calendar and you kind of say, well, let's see. Every 3 weeks there's going to be a small altercation, and every 3 months it's going to be a little bit bigger. And and approximately every 3 years we're going to have like a mini war. You can almost plot it on a calendar, and that's the way that it's been going for since 2006.
Mm.
Now we've got something else going on. We've got this shock attack that took place on October the 7th, which, no surprise, it really hit us without warning. I guess there's a number of reasons that we could dive into as to why we were so surprised, but let's leave that for the moment. And suffice to say that atrocities were committed by Hamas on a level, right, that we have never experienced in our lifetime. We talk about the type of barbarism that took place, and it reminds us of the pogroms that took place really in Europe, and the sort of things that my great grandparents, when they fled Moldova and the Ukraine, okay, and that sort of areas, back in, the beginning of the 1900s, we hear stories about that, and our minds in the 21st century minds can't wrap our heads around what does that mean when people, so-called people, can act in such a ruthless way. And this is what happened to us on October the 7th, and I'm sure your listeners know all about that. And of course, our response was very simple. We need to eradicate this evil entity, period. That's what we need to do. And as a result, the escalation in the area has been rather intense, with Hezbollah getting involved, with the type of rocket attacks coming from Lebanon. And I'm going to put it clearly, it's coming from Lebanon. A sovereign nation, Lebanon, is allowing the Hezbollah terrorists to attack Israel. Okay. Lebanon, a country recognized by the United Nations as a sovereign nation, is allowing terrorists on its territory, on its turf, to attack another sovereign nation. Just so that we're clear about that. And so we've got that going on. We've got threats coming out of Syria. We've got a war on four fronts right now. And things have really escalated. As a result, we've never been busier. We literally have requests for shelters, everything from schools to trauma therapy centers, to farms, to guard posts. And we even had a request, which we fulfilled, of placing a bomb shelter at a cemetery so that the families of those who were butchered could bury their loved ones and run to a shelter when they came under attack. So we've been very, very busy.
Wow. How many bomb shelters have you distributed since the war? And has this been under fire while you've been distributing them?
Wow. How many have we placed since October the 7th? We've probably, to date, right now, the number is somewhere in the area of about 35. That's since October the 7th. I'm looking at my order sheet right now. We've got another 15 coming up on the waiting list. And then there are those that we simply can't get to that we're not able to provide assistance for. So we're busy. In addition to that, the main thing we've been doing, besides ordering shelters, is our shelters are transportable, meaning that all of our shelters come built in with these hooks on top of them. We leave the hooks there permanently. And what that means is that in times like this, when the shelter needs to be moved to where it's more urgently needed, we bring in a crane and a truck. Usually the crane is like a 300-ton crane, and we're able to lift up that shelter, put it on a truck, and move it to where it's urgently needed. And we've been doing that every single day, sometimes twice a day, sometimes three times a day. We've been relocating shelters because that is able to get the shelter to where it's needed urgently, same day. And that's been a big part of our work right now.
Now, the news is very much focused on what's happening in Gaza, but are there rockets coming into Israel every day?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, my wife and I and our granddaughter took shelter yesterday in our home when multiple explosions took place over our house. And we live near Jerusalem. So
Mm.
that's, I mean, and you can imagine what every single day there is rocket attacks hitting northern, southern Israel. You've got 150,000 people in northern Israel have been evacuated from their homes. This is insane. You've got all the families who've been living in the southern Israel communities known as the Gaza Belt area. They're evacuated. Those people who are still remaining, right? The rockets can go further than that. And now they're hitting Ashdod, they're hitting Ashkelon, they're going into Beersheba. I was filling up with gas the other day in southern Israel, and rockets exploding overhead. I had to like run. The worst thing you could probably be where you could be is probably filling up your car with gas. So I'm like, all right, well, I'm abandoning my car, and I ran into a gas station that was run by a Arab Bedouin man. And the two of us basically ran for shelter inside the gas station, and that's what we're dealing with every day.
Yeah. What are these bomb shelters made of, and how much do they cost?
The bomb shelters are made of a specific material. It's not your regular cement, it's called trauma cement. And they go through rigorous testing through the Home Front Command. We literally do what's called reverse engineering, where we say, okay, what would it take? What kind of a shelter would it take to withstand an explosion, a direct hit, obviously shrapnel spray? And once we test that material, then we actually begin to build our shelters. So we kind of like do the reverse engineering to make sure that our starting point is a shelter that can withstand that kind of threat. It's not going to be as I say, not your typical concrete room. So it's got materials in there that is going to be able to withstand that. It's got high vaulted ceilings. It's got ventilation. It's obviously got a special door for shock waves. It's got an escape window. They're very, very well designed.
Yeah.
The bell shelters look like bells. The cube shelters look like cubes. You get the idea. Different sizes for different flavors. As far as prices, they really range. So I'm going to give you the range, okay, and then that way you can go from there. But it ranges between the low end being at around $17,000 US, and then up from there, so that you're getting into the $28,000 range for the cube shelters. And then we have larger shelters. We do also the shelter renovations, and we also have an amazing project based on new technology where we can go into an existing room, right? Think about the room that you're sitting in right now. And what we do is we'd kick you out of your room for about a week. And we bring in a team and they would literally take out the walls, take out the ceilings, take out the floor, take out your window, and then replace everything with this Israeli made, right, material. It's a very thin material that basically turns your room into a bomb shelter.
Mm.
And we then cover all that up, right? It's almost like a cage or a interior space, and then we covered that back up with walls, with ceiling, with the flooring, and a special bomb-proof window, bomb-proof door, and you're left with a beautiful room that is a safe space. And that has been a wonderful, wonderful solution. And obviously, the price point on that is a little bit more expensive. But what I want to emphasize is that it's not an all or nothing thing, right? It's not like somebody comes along and says, well, if I can't donate an entire shelter, then there's no point. Wrong. The fact is that every single dollar, euro, shekel, Swiss franc, peso, yen, whatever comes into our organization goes to one thing and one thing only, and that is protecting lives. So we batch donations together, and as soon as we have the funds to order a shelter, off it goes. Or communities or individuals can match with others, and they can come to do it in partnership, or we can help them match with other donors. So everything is possible.
Mm. And now, when the siren goes off, how long do you have to get into a bomb shelter?
Depends where you are. If you're in Eshkol region, which is right by the Gaza border, you've got about 5 to 10 seconds,
Mm.
which isn't even enough time to even absorb that you're hearing a siren at all. The further away that you get from the Gaza area, you're talking about Ashkelon, for example, being about 45 seconds. By the time you're getting further back here, it gotten further. By the time you get to the Jerusalem area where we are, they say that you have 60 seconds, but I can tell you from even yesterday's experience, I heard the siren up in my office, which is in the top floor of our house. Our bomb shelter, of course, is in the basement, is in the ground floor of our house. I heard the siren. I ran to the shelter. It was less than 60 seconds till we heard the 4 explosions over our home. So those numbers vary. Northern Israel, 0. In other words, it's called Shetach Ephes, which means zero field, 0 seconds field, which means that if you're in Shlomi, right? If you're in Ma'alot, the first warning you're going to receive is the sound of the actual explosion, right? Which is going to be simultaneous with the siren. So it's very, very, very tight up in the north.
Wow. Can you explain to our listeners what the Iron Dome is?
The Iron Dome is a missile interceptor system. It's an amazing Israeli invention that basically has 2 smart missiles. And these missiles are actually very lightweight. You can actually, pick one up with one hand. And it's mostly a lot of tech going on inside of them. Basically, what happens is that once the army has a heat signal coming out from the source of the launch, right? Because every rocket coming out of Gaza or from Lebanon is going to have a heat signature at the moment of the blast. They're then able to lock in to that rocket and determine its trajectory and figure out where it's heading. And if it's heading to a populated area inside Israel, then they're going to intercept it. They're going to send off usually 2 Iron Dome interceptors. So the interceptors themselves do not actually collide with the inbound rocket. What they do is you'll see the pictures. It's really, really wild. These pictures are incredible. The enemy rocket is coming in a straight trajectory, and the Iron Dome rockets are doing all sorts of acrobatics, figuring out where that inbound rocket is. So if you see some of the pictures, they're wild. And what they do is they get really nice and close, really as close as possible without actually touching them. And then the Iron Dome missiles actually self-explode. They self-explode, and in the process, bring down themselves and the inbound enemy rocket. The entire thing explodes in the air and comes crashing to the ground, which is really amazing in many respects because it allows for the prevention of serious, serious damage and disaster in populated areas. One of the problems, however, is that, right, laws of physics, everything, right, it's going to fall down.
Yeah.
And all that shrapnel and all that metal and all that burning comes straight down. Now, if it happens to be over a small community like a kibbutz or a moshav or a small town, you better get into a shelter because that stuff's going to pour down on you and it's going to be hot and it's going to be sharp and it can kill you. And if it's a field, as happens on a daily basis, those fields are generally going to catch fire because that stuff is hot and it's combustible. And those fields, get immediately start field fires.
Wow.
And so on the one hand, it's amazing, it's great, it's a blessing. And at the same time, we also, we have to be careful with them too.
We've seen thousands of rockets launched from Gaza and from Lebanon. What would it be like without the Iron Dome?
Okay, so the main thing is that if you didn't have Iron Dome, it would give Israel less independence, or less, how should I say this, less time to make calculated decisions. If you had, for example, a direct hit into a kindergarten, into a city like Ashkelon, God forbid, and as a result of that rocket, okay, there were many, many casualties. I mean, it's a horrible thing to talk about, but these are the scenarios we need to take in consideration. Israel would have no choice but to respond harshly immediately. And the problem is that our policy has always been that our response will come, but on our terms and in the right time. You want to be able to be ready. You want to be able to do, if you're going to do a ground invasion, do it in a calculated way with maximum amount of intelligence and preparation. You don't want to go in with a sense of like, okay, we're coming after you for what you did. And I think that if we didn't have Iron Dome and something like that happened, we would naturally have to go in and we would be less prepared. Okay, that's number one. Number two, of course, is the obvious, and that is that without Iron Dome, urban areas would be literally sitting there totally exposed, and everyone would be running to shelters, which is fine and dandy and everything. But again, you'd literally be living in bomb shelters, and that is not normal life.
And of course, technology is helping in the warning system with apps as well. What do the apps do?
So the apps are really great because it used to be that the only way that you would know if there was a threat, a rocket attack, is that there would be a siren usually positioned in the center of a town, or on a building or something like that, or at a school, and the sound would go off. Of course, like everything, there could be problems with that. There could be a wiring issue. There could be some mechanical failure. There could be an issue with the volume levels. Okay. And so therefore you may not always hear the siren for your area. And even though they've been improving that, of course, I think they've got that at a really good place. What the apps do is they give you your siren right in your pocket, right on your phone itself. And you can adjust it too, so that you can either adjust it so that you're hearing sirens whenever they go off anywhere in the country, or you can even do in your settings, you can do it for the areas that you're interested in. For example, you have your family in a particular area, or you can have it for the area that you are specifically located. And so it's really adjustable. You can have the kind of siren that, the type of sound that is going to, be give you the best maximum alert, whether, so there's all sorts of really cool things. And I definitely encourage your listenership to download the app so that they can, no matter where they are in the world, they can be with us, right? In prayer and in action and in mind, knowing that we're currently running to shelters.
Yeah. When you've been placed in these bomb shelters, have you been hearing the stories of the people?
All the time. All the time. We're hearing about how the shelters save people's lives. That's obviously the number one feedback that we get usually after an attack. People are like, there's no way I'd be alive today if it weren't for that shelter.
Yeah.
And so we asked them to expand. What are they talking about? And they'll say quite clearly, we have a situation where somebody parked their car in a parking lot. They didn't even realize that there was a shelter. Siren went off, and then they immediately just ran almost blindly, if you will. And sure enough, there was the bomb shelter. Well, that is because we also place the shelter in places that are obvious. In other words, we don't place them behind, in secret areas or something like that where no one would find them. We place them so that you're going to get to them and that they're accessible. So somebody wrote and said to us, yeah, I parked my car, siren went off. I just started running and whoop, there was a shelter right in front of me. Ran into the shelter. The rocket hit the parking lot, destroyed my car and about 10 others, but I'm alive. Amazing story. We have and then the other stories that we're hearing, Paul, are not about life and death scenarios, but more about how it dealt with people's trauma and how their PTSD would be less drastic, let's just say, because there was a shelter there. We've heard stories, for example, we heard about a 14-year-old girl who literally, like, she took her sleeping bag and her yoga mat, right? And literally moved into one of our shelters and said, I'm just staying here. I'm just staying here. I don't have the ability to leave and have, so you know what? If that's going to help her, and if that's going to give her comfort, and if that's going to give her the kind of security so that she is not going to be traumatized, I'm glad. And then the final thing is one of the things as a parent and as a grandparent, as a grandfather, really touches my heart. And that is the issue of mature bedwetting. And the fact is that we've been hearing from social workers that the incidence of mature bedwetting amongst teenagers in southern Israel is above national and international averages. And what we've been hearing is, and that's obviously an expression of anxiety and fear and stress. And what we've been hearing is that when a shelter is placed, that the percentage or the average, that the percentage of teenagers bedwetting actually returns to national and international normal levels. And I got to tell you, as a parent and also as a grandfather, that really breaks my heart, because if we can, if that happens, that means that people are taking their stress with them to bed. And if we can do something to minimize that stress and to bring comfort, then I think we've done a good job. So we're saving lives, we're reducing stress, and we're bringing calm and sense of security on a day-to-day basis.
Can people sponsor or give to a bomb shelter?
Yeah, that's how we basically are able to do what we do, right? Bottom line, it takes money. There's no, these things cost money. And even though we probably get the best rates in terms of shelter prices than anybody else in the country, because literally this is all we do, right? All we do is we do shelters. So as a result, we have a very good relationship with about 4 different manufacturers, and we're always able to get good pricing, but it takes donations. The best thing to do is go to our website at operationlifeshield.org. Again, that's operationlifeshield, one word, .org, O-R-G. And you'll see more information about our work. There'll be opportunities there for donating. We are a registered nonprofit in the United States and in Canada, and anybody from all over the world is welcome to be part of what we're doing and to be partners with us.
What is your prayer finally for this time?
My prayer for this time is the prayer that I've been really praying every day, and that is first and foremost to bless our brave soldiers in the Israel Defense Forces, who are, including my son, who is in a tank on the Gaza border, even as we speak.
Wow.
And all of his friends and all of the people who are defending the land of Israel and who are doing their utmost to rid the world of this demonic force called Hamas. And I want to bless them. And our prayer is that God should cover our soldiers with wings of protection and allow them to do their job, do it well, do it as the most moral and ethical army in the world, but also do it with the force that they need to do it with, right? To do it with the power of David's army, of King David's army, and to return home safely and healthy.
Amen. What's your website again for people who'd like to know more?
Our website is operationlifeshield.org.
Okay, great. Shmuel, thank you very much for sharing.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. I really do. And I'm glad to be talking with you again. And I appreciate everything you're doing to really get the word out and keep people connected to the truth.